Welcome to Femme Parler Podcast, where we are unpacking opinions and changing destinations. I am your host, Sherley, where each week we will chat about how to rise strong out of all types of obstacles that come with relationships. Through personal life experiences and discussions ranging from infidelity, trust, forgiveness, sex, heartbreak, self-love, and so much more. I am passionate and obsessed to provide guidance to every woman to create a better life. Let's dive in, pull up a seat, make sure you're cozy, and get ready to be challenged and encouraged while you learn. With me, your virtual girlfriend. All right, welcome back to Femme Parler, where we're going to continue part 2. What does marriage mean from a point of view of a divorced woman? So, Alicia, as we continue this discussion today, I wanted you to share your story with the listeners so they can understand what led you to the point of divorce in your marriage. And how long were you married, Alicia, just to remind everyone?
I was married for 8 years.
Gotcha. And I'm sorry, how long did you guys date for?
5. So we were in total rounding about maybe 14, almost 15 years together, all together.
Okay, gotcha. So if you can share your story with us so everyone can hear what led to you getting the divorce.
We dated for 5 years. We were, and then we got married not long after college. Things weren't the best in the dating relationship, but it was something that I thought that maybe we could grow through, and maybe it was just the transitions that we were going through. And that was the reason why it wasn't as solid as I thought it would be. We got engaged, we got married, of course. And, in the marriage still, there's a lot of transitions, and we were trying to make the situation work, trying to work through different transitions of jobs, different transitions of moving. And I just assumed that maybe things would get better. The breaking of the marriage started to happen, I would honestly say, after we had our first child together. She was, once again, transitions of her. She was diagnosed with autism. That was another transition that we had to go through together. Job changes, another transition we had to go through together. And things just weren't getting better through those transitions. They were actually getting worse, but we were trying to band-aid them. What led to the ultimate break in the marriage was, once again, another transition, and he decided to pursue his business, but I was not as involved in it. And I think that was either by my personal choice going through the transitions of our daughter's therapies, but also I believe it became something that he kind of kept me out of. And because of that, infidelity stepped in, and then more breaking of the marriage happened, more breaking of the relationship. What ultimately led to the divorce was the infidelity, but also the tearing down of me while he was also exiting the marriage. It was something that I could not take. It was tearing down my self-esteem, everything about myself. It was tearing down. So I was the person who initiated the divorce.
So the initial reason was infidelity, why the marriage truly broke up. And also because you and I have personally talked, you did not want to initially break up. You were willing to go to counseling, work it out. So infidelity, even though that was the initial reason, you were willing to want to work it out, but he did not want to.
No, he did not. Yes, I tried to fight. I think we went to one counseling session, and at the end of that counseling session, he was like, I don't know why I'm here, because there's nothing to save. And still there was a part of me that's, no, I want it to work, but it takes two people to make a marriage work. And I was fighting this fight alone, which was tearing me apart as well. When someone doesn't want you, they do not want you. No matter how much you try to save it, no matter how much you try to fix it up or work through it. Yeah, it was done.
And how long did the infidelity go on, and how did you find out?
Oh, from my understanding, as soon as he hired this new person to work with, it probably started not long after that. I would say, I found out in August of last year, but she was hired on maybe in April. And so, and plus they knew each other prior from their college time together in college. So I would say maybe since total, gosh, I would venture to say it probably went on much longer than that, probably a year before I found. I would have to say it had to be a year because it was just too quickly how things happened. It wasn't someone who just you casually met. I think it was something you were probably building longer than that, but I found out in August. How did I find out? He confessed to it after. When you're with somebody for a long time, you can sense that something is off. And oddly enough, my special needs daughter is very she can kind of feel things too. It's almost like we have this unspoken communication. And when I sat where he sat one time, I could feel that something was off there. It's like a spiritual thing. I felt like lust. I felt like lust was sitting where he was sitting. And then I was like, wait a minute, something's not right. Because during this time, I was really seeking God for the marriage, fasting. I was praying. I was getting closer to God during this breakdown. And it's like my spiritual awareness was more heightened during that time. And so when he confessed, yes, I have been. It was nothing to him to confess about it. But I don't believe he would have ever told me if I didn't first sense it. But you can almost, you can tell when something's not right. Coming home late, the disconnect between you and that partner, you can almost tell that something is going on. So yeah, he confessed to it in August of last year.
Do you believe that he would have ever confessed to it if you did not approach him about it?
No. His exact words is that we didn't want to hurt you. So I was not going to tell you about it. We wanted to kind of keep it. We wanted to kind of keep it to ourselves because he knew the marriage was over in his mind. So it was like if I never knew, it would be fine because he's going to move on with her anyway.
Okay. All right. So the next question is that I do have for you. And Kira, do you have anything you would like to ask Alicia before we move on to the next question based on her story?
Well, first, I want to thank you for sharing it. I think that's a really vulnerable thing to share. And I didn't realize how recent that was. Because even though that was August of last year, that was still not that long ago. And I still feel like there's a healing process that has to happen for you that's still ongoing even now. So I really do appreciate you sharing it. I guess one of my questions is, were there red flags when you were dating and you ignored them? Or like, because for me, I feel like there were red flags that I ignored because I was taught to believe the best about a person, even when I felt like something wasn't right. So for me, like, I knew that there were red flags and I ignored them. And then when they started showing up again, when I was married, then I didn't ignore them.
Exactly. There were red flags. One of the biggest things this has taught me is if they have a not so great relationship with their mother, that they are not going to be the best in the relationship because there's some unresolved trauma. There's some unresolved childhood trauma that was there. And I knew about it, but in my head, I was going to be Superwoman and I was going to show him that, he's going to be okay because I got his back. And no, that was the number one. That was the biggest red flag that I ignored that showed up later. And so, yeah, it was little red flags here and there that you could tell you was like, now that you're out of it, you was like, wow, I saw that then, but I ignored it because just like you said, I wanted to see the best in him. I wanted to show him that not all women are like that and I can do it, not knowing that I was dealing with my own trauma too. So we're both two broken people from broken pasts. I had daddy issues. We had mommy issues and we were just not in a position to be together. We really weren't.
Okay, that's all I have right now. I will jump in when I'm just trying to take it all in. It's just a lot.
Not a problem. So I have two questions for you, Alicia, based on what you just said. And I also wanted to bring an attention to the listeners. As you see, you're listening to three women who dealt with infidelity in various different ways because infidelity creeps up to you in all different types of ways. And, one thing that we all are saying on here is the signs. The signs are there when you've been with somebody for a long time, as Alicia has said. you pay attention to little cues that are just off. It could be something as simple as how he said good morning to you. It could be how he's laying in bed with you at night. Maybe he's not cocking his foot like he normally does. And I know this might sound stupid, and I'm trying to warm it up a little bit, but these are the cues. It's so hard to put it into words.
Because every person is different.
Exactly. When you're not the one in that situation, and everyone's different and everyone's relationship is different, but paying attention to the signs that are literally right in front of our face, but we ignore them, and we ignore them in such an unhealthy way. And then it makes us like lash out when the time comes. Another thing you said that was interesting, and Kira, I want you to tell me how you feel. You said any man that doesn't have a good relationship with his mother, that's a red flag for you. I feel 50-50 about that, and I will tell you that. And I'm speaking from a mother's standpoint. I believe I have a great relationship with my son, but it's hard for me to determine if, when he is an adult, if he's going to focus on the good or focus on the negative. And when I hear you say that, it makes me wonder, oh my gosh, when he goes out into the world, how are people going to perceive me? How is his wife or his girlfriend going to perceive me? And even now to this day, I always think, oh my gosh, I hope he sets a good example for his wife or his girlfriend, because it all comes back to me. And I agree, but I don't agree, because I do believe that when we are older and we're humans, we have choices that we can make. We could either choose to go to the light, or we could either choose to go to the dark. And it goes for me the same when people try to use their childhood as a cripple of why they can't do this, or my father wasn't in my life, so it affects me this way. And I do understand that. And by no means am I a professional, but I do believe that we have choices in life. I didn't come from like this all fabulous, great relationship. I felt like my parents probably should have got a divorce later in life, but I don't use that as my cripple. So, Kira, I want you to comment on what you think of, do you feel as though is that a red flag? I guess I should ask you.
I do. I agree with her completely, 100%, because the way she stated it, how I heard it was more trauma. Is that how I heard it, Alicia? So for me, childhood trauma, dealing with parents will totally shape your life differently. How you treat women, how you respect women, even for a woman, and how she seeks out men because she's longing for that attention and affection from a man. My relationship with my dad, I feel like he was very, very strict. And he was like that hard fist. So I wasn't a daddy's girl. I didn't have that experience with my father. And I always longed for that, because it wasn't like my father wasn't in my life, but he was just really hard. I don't remember like a lot of affection from him. I just remember, and I mean, there were times where he was affectionate, but that wasn't his personality. So I think when I got into my teenage years, I was dating quick because I wanted that love and affection from a guy. And I feel like I made a lot of wrong decisions when I was young that should have been taught to me by my father. So even though I, as an adult or as a young adult, I could make my own choices, I still feel like it handicapped me in how I viewed relationships and how I moved and acted in relationships, because I wasn't taught well. I didn't have a good example. So in a sense, I don't feel like it was like it crippled me, but I do definitely feel like it handicapped me, and that will travel with you in relationships until you deal with it. So you go to therapy, or you talk it out, or work out your own personal stuff. But that's really hard to do once you're connected to another person. It's like, that's what you need to work out before you get married, or you know what I'm saying?
Gotcha. And are you still close with your father, Alicia?
He passed away about 14 years ago. And it was more along the lines of was never really connected. Like, you provided, but emotionally or just in general, you were here, but not here. So, And like you stated, it is a choice that we choose to make. It's a choice that people can make. And I chose to just kind of like try to find that in someone else. The attention, the love, oh, you taught me that. Oh, things that it was almost in a sense I remember telling my ex-husband that, you're kind of like teaching me things or that my dad should have taught me. I appreciate it. Was almost as though there was when I realized, once again, when you're out of it, like, shoot, I was looking for something in him that he couldn't give me. And from my dad. So really it was something just like Kira said, we were supposed to work this out before we got married. Like I should have addressed this trauma years ago. It could have been a situation that maybe he wasn't the one for me, but because of my brokenness and his brokenness, he was looking maybe for something in me that his mom didn't give him. And I was looking for something in him that my dad didn't give me.
Yeah, that's spot on.
Yep. Okay. And Alicia, this was your first marriage, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Will this be your last?
I'm so glad nobody can see my face. I'm trying to work. It's the trust that has to be rebuilt because right now it's like, no, I don't trust you. If someone came into my life, where you going? Where you been? Who are you talking to? Where I want to go. But it would be something that wouldn't last long at all. So right now I would say, I hope it's not. But at the same time, I got to find me first.
That's a blessing that you're still hopeful about it. And again, that goes back to tell you, it's when we start off with that trust, we start off with that newbie. It's 100%.
Yeah, it's so true.
Next question. Why should Christians not be scared of divorce? So you two are like my Christian friends. You two are the ones that I'm contacting because, Kira, we talked about it in season 1. You have certain friends you go to for certain advice and you have other friends you go to for a certain piece of advice.
Right.
So for our Christian listeners out there who tend to frown, some of them, not all of them, may frown on divorce and it's to death do us part. No matter what, I'm going to stick through. What do you have to say to them from a Christian viewpoint?
Traditionally, when we look at our grandfathers, our grandmothers, think about everything they put up with just because, no, we got to stick together to death do we part. We got to work this thing out. We got to no. That's more trauma that your children have to endure, that you endure. And at the end of the day, now that I'm once again out of it, I can see like, oh my gosh, what would I have been if I stayed in this? I would be a shell of a woman. We should not be afraid of divorce. If it's toxic, if it's abuse, if it's degrading, no, that's all I can say. No, we should not be afraid of divorce because at the end of the day, nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors. If you're in church, you could be praising God in service and go home to hell. How is God being edified in that? How is that bringing him glory for you to go home to be abused?
Mm-hmm.
No. We should not be afraid of divorce.
Because we shouldn't become complacent because of our Christian viewpoints.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay. And how do you feel, Kira?
I agree to an extent because I don't think that anyone should stay in any marriage if there is any form of abuse. It's physical, sexual, emotional, any kind of abuse like that where that person is tearing you down and making you feel like less of a person. I don't necessarily think that counseling is something that's going to change their heart. I mean, that would have to be a total miracle from God for someone like that to just not be beating on you and not talking down to you. However, I do feel like there are situations where you may want to get divorced. Like me, I wanted to get divorced. I didn't want to work on it anymore because I felt like I was tired of working on it, but not necessarily because I felt like it couldn't be saved. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I think has to be a situational awareness when you're talking about divorce, and that like every situation and circumstance is very, very different. It's very delicate. Any form of abuse is a no-brainer. Like, you can get divorced. But I think like for me, it was just like, I just didn't want to do the work. Like, I'm tired of having to do the work. Like every year I have to do work at this. Like, I'm tired. Like, I'd rather just be single than be having to work so hard at this relationship all the time. Like, this is not what I signed up for. But I think like how you said, I prayed and I fasted, and it definitely brought me closer to God in a different way. And I think I had to remember who my source was. Like, God is my source, and not focus so much on what my partner was giving me or not giving me. Yeah, it's still a journey. I'm still like coming out of that, where now I don't necessarily want to file for divorce, but I start counseling this weekend, actually. And this is my third round. Okay. So in my head, I'm like, 3 times is a charm. Like, if something doesn't improve after this, and we're going to have to like, but I didn't want to file for divorce and really not be able to say that I really put in all the effort and like I really tried, because at one point I wasn't trying. So I agree with you, but I also feel like some situations like mine, I shouldn't get divorced yet. My parents are divorced. My grandparents were divorced. So I come from, I don't want to say a lineage of divorce, but I just don't want that for my son. I don't want that legacy for him. I want it to stop. And I did see like great marriages between my grandparents when they remarried. But my parents never remarried. They just divorced each other. And I'm glad that they got divorced. It was one of those things where, like you're saying, how you don't know what kind of woman you would have been. I can't even imagine what my parents would have been like if they stayed together. They were so miserable, and it was so clear. And we were like, what are you guys doing? Like, just... And then when I brought that to my mom's attention, she said it was a relief for her. And I'm like, really? Because she was so worried about how it would affect us. So yeah, that's it.
So now you heard the viewpoint of 2 married women, and you guys have heard my viewpoint. I'm not legally married in the eyes of New Jersey. Khalif and I have been together now for 23 years, and I come from a very Christian family. My grandfather was a pastor. My, Haitian strict background, we are into the church. Like, that church is drilled in you from the time you're a child. So I've always, even as a little girl, always had the warped little thinking of marriage was important to me, but it wasn't always at the top of my priority list. Like, I was that girl that if by the time I was 30, I didn't have children, I was going to go right over to the sperm bank or pick my human donor, because I wasn't going to wait till you felt I was qualified to be your wife to have children. And the story behind that, which I did speak about in the beginning of the episode, is my aunt who didn't get married and didn't have children. And she didn't have children because she was waiting on her husband. And I think as a little girl, I guess that shaped my thought process. Like, what? You waiting on your husband, but you want kids? Oh, okay. And I guess maybe that's what made my thinking change. And to this day, she's in her 50s, and I think my aunt's almost 60, to be honest with you. No children, because she was waiting on her husband. So, that's a sad story of itself. And I feel like it's just the upbringing. It's how the world frightens you to, no, you can't do that because you don't have a husband. No, if I want children, I'm going to have children regardless. But that's just my viewpoint. That's not everybody's viewpoint. So I'm interested in hearing what the listeners have to say based on 3 different people. We have 2 women here who have been married. And with me, I agree with you, Alicia. Divorce, I don't feel as though it should be shunned upon or looked at as a negative. I do believe that if it's necessary, it needs to happen, but only the 2 people are going to know. Definitely, if you are in any type of physical, emotional, verbal abuse, I should say, that's definitely something that should strongly be considered. And, when you're married, you can always separate. And if the separation doesn't cure things, then you can definitely have the divorce. But I definitely don't put a negative on divorce. You never know. You may get back together. I just feel like it's a mindset for me. And I've learned that it's all a mindset. People change. Maybe the people we were 10 years ago are not the people we are now, and our compatibility is different. I see things differently. I want things differently, and we're going different paths. And if that's the case, then it's not a bad thing that we need to part ways. But you've heard a lot of people say, oh, if he cheats, I'm out. I'm done. He's trash. Nope, I'm not tolerating that. That's disrespectful. All this verbiage that we tend to use until we're actually in the present situation. So I want to hear, what was the reason why you chose to say, and then, we'll all comment on, since we've all experienced infidelity in some way, shape, or form.
It's funny. We say, oh, when he cheats, I'm out. Traditionally, once again, going back to that traditional mindset in the Christian church. Oh, I love him. I love him and I want to stick this through. It's happened before, and thinking about past relationships with other people, people cheat. It's okay. We can get through this. And I did not want to be a statistic, and lose my entire family, lose my husband. Let's work through this. We can get through this. It's not that big of a deal. But when I saw that you were like, listen, I want this girl. We're going to have something. Oh, okay. So this is what you want to do. So my whole attitude changed once I heard that, oh, he's not willing to work. It wasn't okay, honey. Yeah, I cheated. Let's work through this. I'm sorry. Let's go to counseling. It was like nah, I'm still going to choose her. Oh, okay. So then my attitude was like, oh, so now, okay, I'm ready to go too. Since, that was kind of where I was. At first I was willing to fight. I was willing to work through it. Let's go to counseling. But when I heard his side of, oh no, I'm still going to choose her. It was the bitterness, the anger, so you're really going to walk away from this. And that's when I was like, fine, I'll let it go. Cause once again, I'm not going to compete with another woman for your affection, not knowing that you just weren't willing to fight. Knowing that you were not willing to fight for it. I was not going to chase you down to make this work. That's kind of where I was in it.
To be honest with you, your response, I appreciate, because your husband didn't want to work it out. So we're hearing it now from a different perspective. Kira and I, our situations are differently. So it's nice to hear, to offer a different perspective to our listeners. Your husband didn't want to work it out. You wanted to, but he didn't. So that's why it got to what it was. So Kira, I guess we can share a brief of why didn't infidelity scare you at first when you first heard?
Why it didn't?
Yeah. So why didn't you immediately say, I'm out, or we're going to have a divorce, or I want to separate, like immediately?
Oh, immediately. Because it was a very tricky situation as far as transitions. We were literally about to move the following week. So I found out that was happening. And then I had to be on a plane 10 days, not even 10 days later, to move to a whole new state and city with him. So with my child, it just wasn't something that in my mind that was like, this can happen right away. It was also delicate because I didn't know how he would respond to it. I was concerned about his mental health. And I also had a small child. So for me, I didn't want to be reactionary. I was very upset, but I didn't feel like making that decision right then would have benefited me or him or my son. So that's why I didn't, say, oh, you got to get out or whatever. Like
going through that hectic move, you think you would have initially separated?
In a sense. Yeah, I think because I would have needed the space. I think the move masked a lot of stuff because it was so chaotic for like that first month. After all that happened, it wasn't even a lot of time to process it and deal with it, honestly. So I feel like if I had the time to just not have him there in my face and like could really go to therapy and like try to work out my own stuff and how I felt about it, I feel like that would have been productive if it was for that reason, not just reactionary, like you got to get out because you did this and I don't ever want to see you again, or, and also because you have to remember, like, just because they cheat on you doesn't mean that you don't still love them, right? So you still care about this person. You still want the best for them, even though they did something so horrible to you. So it's like, I didn't want to see him hurt or hurt himself or anything like that. So I still was careful in how I handled it. And even if I went back and the move wasn't happening, I still think I would have wanted to separate immediately before a specific reason versus just being like, oh, like, I want you to get out. That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. And for my reason, my number one reason was because of my own fault. I didn't want to throw stones when also I had created infidelity myself. So I was looking at it from two different windows. The second reason was because, as you just said, Kira, I was still in love with this man.
Mm-hmm.
And since my situation too, not only is it infidelity, a life was created from my infidelity. So most people would probably hit running, oh no, this is more than I can handle. And I want to say the third reason, my kids played a role, but there was a time where that third reason was really scratched out because I realized I had to take care of myself in order to be the best mom that I could be. So I think in the beginning, my children played a role, but that went way out the window like quickly. So I think the top two reasons were love and my own mistakes in life. And I had no right to cast stones at this individual. And I genuinely wanted to make it work. And we both wanted to make it work. And the journey is not easy. Even till this day, we've went from the situation till now we're like past 50%. And we're still learning, working, growing, So it is, it's part of life. It's just learning how to take a negative and turn it into a positive. That's how I've programmed it in my mind. Taking that negative and turning it into a positive the best way that I know how to. There's no manual to this relationship thing. There's no manual to being a parent. There's no manual to life. We're all just literally feeding off of each other and making the best of what's given to us. So that's, I guess all our reasons pretty much align. Love. And we all really, truly wanted to work it out. We all wanted to work it out. We weren't ready. It makes me wonder if a person goes like running right away, were they really, truly connected in the relationship?
That's a good point.
Yeah. So our next question, what steps should a woman take after divorce, Alicia? And I know it's still fresh for you. So what steps have you taken that has helped you get past this point? And, Alicia, with you being my friend, I've heard the tears over the phone. So I know in the beginning it was extremely hard. And even after you made that decision, you still weren't happy with it. So what steps have you taken now this far into it to keep your sanity, to run your business, to be the best mom that you could be and, the best daughter that you could be with your mom and your friends and stuff? How do you keep yourself sane?
The first thing I can say is deal with the emotions. Never, ever, ever feel like I should be further along by now. I should stop crying. I don't need to be crying. I should be better than this. Putting on this superwoman cape when you're crushed in the inside. No, it will be times, okay, first of all, deal with the emotions, however that looks. If you got to go cry, literally, I cried every single day. And like someone told me, the tears will get less and less. I was like, it's impossible. It's no way. Yeah, they will get less and less. You get triggered by certain things, but they will get less and less. So deal with the emotions. Therapy. Did I say therapy? Therapy. If you have to go back, go back. And I went to a place to where I didn't graduate out of therapy. I started realizing that I needed to connect with God even more because therapy, I was going to this lady so broken that I felt like my sessions, of course, that's the point of it, but I just felt like there was a disconnect with me. Like I had to step back from therapy to say, okay, God, I'm broken. You're breaking me here. What do I need to learn? So in the midst of the breaking, he was rebuilding me. So I am thinking about revisiting therapy because I'm at a different place. I feel like now I know this sounds so crazy, but that's what therapists are there for. But I felt like I was just too much of a mess to even get anything from therapy, if that makes sense. I was not taking anything from it. I was not saying that she was a terrible therapist. It's just my mind was everywhere. My heart was everywhere. I wasn't receiving anything. So now that I'm in a better place, I feel like I can really get something, her tips, her advice. I can get it now. Another thing is just finding yourself again, whatever that means. That's whatever's left of you, I guess you could say. You're trying to rebuild, but it's just finding out, first of all, you're a wife. In some cases, you're a mother. You lost yourself in those two roles. And the one thing I learned when I walked away from it was like, who am I? Like literally, I'm still trying to find out, who am I? Because for so long, I was the mom, I was the nurse, I was the doctor, I was the taxi cab driver, I was the cook, I was a wife. I had no time to know who I was. And so the steps that you have to take, like I said, you have to do therapy, you have to feel all the emotions and find out who you are. And if you are religious or if you have a source, get connected to that source. For me, it was God. The closer I got to him, the more he helped deal with me. Alicia, this is bitterness. You need to pray about this. Alicia, this is not how you treat him. I know he's done you wrong. You're not supposed to do that. And in this process, I was broken over and still being broken. Just the other day, an attitude I had or the way I was carrying around, God, like, you're not going to keep that.
Mm-hmm.
You need to come to me. You need to come to me with that. So in this process, it's been a lot of breaking, but that's the steps that I have taken. Still healing, but those are the steps that I am taking.
Just to recap, you said check your emotions, letting people know it is okay to cry, seek therapy, counseling, and at the right time. Your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth session may not be the one that make it. It may not be to the 10th session till you find that counselor, that therapist, that the puzzle just fits for the both of you. Because just like sometimes your friendships don't always fall into place, the therapy is not always going to fall into place. And as Alicia said, if you feel like the sessions are not going like you want them to go, scale back. That is okay. Maybe you need to revisit at a later time. The other thing Alicia said is finding yourself. Finding yourself, whether, Alicia, am I assuming like meditation, or when you say finding yourself, can you elaborate that again, please?
Oh, yes. Finding out what brought you joy before you got married, before you connected into a union. If it's going to the movies or going to get your nails done, if it's the simple things that we often neglect before we get into the relationship. For me, it was just literally finding who I was. Just, what do I like to do? What can I do? Now it's just a process of like, okay, I think I like going to the movies by myself. And at first it was always them. Oh, babe, let's go out to dinner. Let's go out to the movies. And now it's like, I can still do those things. Reading a book. Oh my gosh. I never had the time to even read a book. Listening to music and really going for a ride. All of these things that I never got to do anymore because I was always in a role.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you find yourself.
Gotcha. And the last thing she had said is religion, tapping into whatever source that may be. For Alicia, it is God is number one for her prayer sessions. So whatever your source may be, everyone's source is different, but tap into that. It may not be religion, but whatever that source may be, possibly. And one thing you said about finding yourself, Alicia, I have to agree with you 100% with that, because I was one of the main victims that was so wrapped up in my relationship, and just, I failed for years to not take care of myself because I was so wrapped up in this other human being that I was slacking emotionally, just the simple things, as you said, just, it was all about him, until I had to realize, well, even though we're together, it still needs to be about me. I need to figure out how to space everything out. My
Right.
parents are just as important as you. My friends are just as important as you. So if I don't know how to equalize everything, and it's even something as simple like Khalif was home today and we were both downstairs. I was working. I was doing some editing or transcribing. I don't even know. And he was on the phone. Loud as I don't know why. I had to say, excuse me, can you please go upstairs? Something as simple as that. He was like, hey, I'm trying to spend time. No, it's not working. Just go upstairs. We'll spend time later.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just like a silly example of like, it's silly as heck, but this was my time.
Right.
I think in the past, I would have been scared to voice myself and say that. But now it's like, babe, we'll spend time later. I got things I got to do. I got to work. So go find another space in the house to talk on the phone.
Right.
But, finding yourself is key. Finding yourself, I definitely, that's a good one, Alicia. Finding yourself, and also letting people know, giving people permission that it is okay to cry. It is okay to be vulnerable, because we all have a story to share. 3 very great women here that you're listening to right now with stories that are so hurtful, but we've decided to voice ourselves because why? We could be a beacon of light to someone else who's going through the same situation, who's like, I'm the only one. No, you're not, girl. You are not. There are others out there. Okay. So the last thing we want to end tonight is, and I guess this is kind of piggybacking on the last question, but what advice do you have to offer a woman who is even possibly thinking about divorce right now, maybe in the transition of divorce right now? what information do you have to offer them? Rather they are on the cups of doing it, or they're like the papers are in motion, but they're shaking?
The first thing I can say, do I regret fighting for a marriage that was failing? No, because it showed me that what I'm passionate about, I will fight for until, there's no more fight left in me. But I would first say, just fight for your marriage first. Fighting means, hey, let's go to counseling. Hey, let's talk about this. If it means dating more, whatever it is, that's the weak link in the marriage, whatever's creating a weak link, try to fix that and go over it with your partner to see, hey, how can we fix this? Do we need to communicate more? Do we need to date more? Do we need to go to counseling? And if none of those things work, then maybe it's time that you sit down and have the talk to see hopefully you have been talking to your partner to see maybe they feel the same way, but just have the talk to figure out what is your next step. But never sacrifice your voice in a relationship. Make sure that if you're using your voice, then it's obvious that there may be a weak link there, is what I'm trying to get to. It's just fight for your marriage as much as you can, whether that's in communication with your partner to figure out what the weak link is. And don't take how should I say it? I know this is going to sound bad, but don't take the option off the table, because it'll help you realize that you do have options and you don't have to stay into something if you're unhappy or if it's just not working.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what you try, if it's just not working, when you're praying, you're communicating with that partner, you went to counseling, never take divorce off the table. And that sounds bad, but it kind of doesn't at the same time, because you just don't want to be into something where you're miserable for the rest of your life trying to make something work that's just not going to work. Just like you stated before, people change, feelings change, situations change. So
Kira, before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to ask Alicia?
No, I think I was really listening to what she said about how to recover, I guess, from once it's happened. And it sounded to me like divorce is definitely grieving a loss. So it's almost like you have to go through those stages of grief. You have to allow yourself to grieve the loss and cry and, do all those things. And I love that you said, finding yourself and finding what brings you joy. When I was in therapy, I was told to do that within my marriage, to separate Kira the wife from Kira the person, and finding out things that I like to do. And that was very helpful for me. So even hearing you say that now, that reminds me, that's something that we need to do in all relationships, because you just have to know who you are before you get wrapped up with someone else. I mean, marriage is not a damn game. Oh my God, it's just not. But I definitely appreciate you sharing.
You're exactly right when it comes, I'm sorry. When you said grieving a loss, that is the nail that hit the coffin right there. People would tell me, oh, it's like a death. I was like, oh, surely I wasn't in the situation yet.
Right.
I'm seeing someone. I often said it would have been easier. This sounds grotesque, but it would have been easier if you would have died.
Right.
Then you would have died. I could have moved on with my life. Case closed, funeral done, but I have to look at you on a regular basis.
Right.
And I have to feel the rejection. I have to feel the abandonment. I have to feel that I wasn't chosen. And I have to look at you in the eye through transition with a child. I'm like, I can't believe this. I'm not at that point. I have avoided it because it's like I'm reliving a death. Right.
I just watched this. I'm not going to say who it was because I'm not trying to give them any more press. They have plenty. But I was watching this episode, and the therapist was on there, and it was about heartbreak. And I don't know if you guys seen it when I start talking about it. And the therapist said to write letters. And that was an aha moment for me, because I am a very visual person. And when I write stuff down, I remember it and I release it. And I think I had told Sherley on an episode season 1, when I get really angry, I'll just write notes on my phone just so I can get it out, and then I'll delete it later. But she was saying how it's really important, like, when you're going through this grieving process, to write letters, to write a really angry, nasty one to him with, like, everything you wanna say, every name you would wanna call him, all the really bad stuff that you would never, like, voice out loud to someone or know, and then you crumble it up and put it in the trash. And then, like, over time, you're writing these letters, and then they will start to get nicer and nicer or more polite. And then you finally get to the letter that you would actually want to give him, but you still would never actually give it to him. But it's just this journey of actually getting it out, which I thought is like, man, I wish I had that advice last year. That would probably have saved me a lot of time, uh, because I feel like you're so wound up too, just because you've not only had to process, like, the infidelity part of it, like, that's a whole thing in itself, but then now you have to process the actual loss of the marriage. So there's all these different things that are happening that you're still not processed, like, you still haven't processed all of it yet, and man, I wish I had that advice last year, but I'm gonna start it. I mean, I start therapy this weekend, so we'll see.
So the advice, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I do know what you're talking about. Is the advice kind of like a second journal where one journal you're writing your day to day?
No, it's not even a journal. She was very clear that it's specifically letters directed to this person that hurt you. And it wasn't necessarily just in a relationship as far as, like, husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. Like, if someone has hurt you and you're very upset with them, you have some kind of heartbreak from them, whatever, whatever, you are going to write this first angry, mean letter to them just so you can, like, get it out. Like, 'cause then once you get it out, you feel like, "Huh, I got it out," even though they'll never see it, you know? But it wasn't in the sense that it was a journal or that it had to be done every day. It was just whenever you feel emotional, you feel triggered, that's what you do to get it out, is write the letters.
All right, so we're going to get ready to wrap this episode up. Number one, Alicia, thank you so much for being a guest. We appreciate you 10,000 times for sharing your story with us so you
Yes.
can help other women who are in that phase in their life right now where, like, they're on the cusp of divorce and they're probably considering it. You're either helping them figure out their decision because ultimately, you know, I always like to say this is a safe haven, not a cult. So it all boils down to what your decision and choice is. So we so appreciate you sharing your story because when you reach this point, divorce is not easy. Leaving that person that you love, and now you want me to talk about it, like that's a whole different beast. So again, many thank yous.
Thank
And just
you.
to recap some of the takeaways that Alicia had said today. So when we had asked the question of what steps should a woman take after divorce, Alicia told us, check your emotions. It is okay to cry. Seek therapy or counseling. And if the first several sessions don't work, you could scale back and, check to see what's going on with yourself first. And then maybe it's not going to be till like the 10th, 11th, or 12th session before you finally find that puzzle that connects. But therapy and counseling is extremely encouraged. She also said finding yourself, whatever that may be. You get so wrapped around your partner that you tend not to take care of yourself in the simplest way possible, even if it's 30 minutes a day of time to yourself. Finding yourself, it is important. You can't be too wrapped up around your partner. You just cannot. It's not healthy. Religion, whatever your source may be, everyone may not be into religion. So whatever the source that you choose to tap into, where you find that inner peace that brings you comfort, for the three of us, it is God. We're all Christian women. We believe in God. So for us, it's God. For you, it may not be. So whatever your source may be, tap into it. The last thing she said when we asked her, what advice do you have to offer to women who are thinking about divorce? Fight for your marriage, one, and two, don't take the option off the table. So if that's something you are considering after you guys did all you could do, or if one partner is truly not interested anymore, don't frown upon divorce. If that's something you have to do, it is okay. All right. Give yourself that permission to know that it is okay. And you're not a bad person for making a choice that is best for you in life. And one advice Kira had to offer, if you are feeling any type of anger or resentment towards someone from the advice that she heard from a counselor as well, write it down. Write letters to yourself. And I think, Kira, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have to give the letters to the person, but you write it down just to release it, correct?
Correct.
So we want to wrap up. And as always, as the mantra for Femme Parler, Femme Naturelle, you want to voice yourself, love yourself, and be yourself until the next episode. Thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in to Femme Parler Podcast. If you want to continue the conversation or share your takeaways, I want to hear from you. Head on over to the website or join our Facebook community and comment your favorite part of the show or share your thoughts. I want to hear what you have to say. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Chat with you next week.